Hello there, welcome or welcome back. Today I decided to do some studies of foxes, and I'll be honest, we did not get off to a very good start. I decided to start off by doing some little watercolor studies, and they turned out pretty bad, to be honest. And then I jumped into my sketchbook and did some sketches with my pen, and that actually went a lot better than I thought it would. I don't really like sketching with pen and without pencil or anything. I just don't feel like I'm very good at it, so this was a really good study session. I'm really glad that I decided to use pen, and it has me feeling a lot more confident now if I decide to use pen again. After that, I decided to try again with the watercolor studies, and I think that it went pretty well. It was really quick, definitely not perfect, but I think that it's pretty obvious that I learned a lot throughout this whole sketchbook session. So let's start with the first watercolor painting. I found a really cute picture of a fox curled up. I thought it was going to be really easy and that I wasn't going to have to worry, so I jumped right in and I was sorely mistaken. This first watercolor study turns out the absolute worst out of everything that I made today. But I was also struggling with my watercolors a little bit because I just wasn't picking colors that were very conducive to what I wanted. I wanted to have a little bit of a yellowy orange kind of look. And these first couple were meant to be more true to the studies, so they ended up more red, and I just really didn't like it, so I had to take some creative liberty later on and make the foxes like a yellowy orange. I think that another issue that I had doing this very first watercolor study was that I was using a brush that was too large, and I think that I wasn't warmed up for the day, so that one was really not great to start off with. But I think, to be honest, with these sketchbook session type videos, I should really just purposefully do the first one bad, because it always turns out bad regardless of what it is and regardless of what we're doing. I sit down to do these sketchbook session videos and the first one is just always the worst, so I think that I should really just start making them bad on purpose, getting the bad stuff out of the way, and then jumping into more focused studies. Our second watercolor study was much better, but it still lacked a lot. I liked the pose. It was kind of just a fox jumping up in the air. I really liked the drawing that I had done for it, and I think that I did try harder with the watercolors, but like I said before, the colors just weren't right. And for this one, I decided to push into the wet and wet technique, and it did not go very well because I wasn't really paying attention while the watercolor was drying, and so the darker parts that were supposed to be the red bled into the parts that were supposed to stay white. So it was really unfortunate. I thought about taking out my gouache, but ultimately, I decided it didn't matter because I would need to still do my fox studies. And then the last watercolor study that I did before the sketchbook session was much better. I will say it turned out way better than the first two. I am a lot happier with it, but it definitely has its flaws. I still needed to learn a lot about foxes, so it was a very good start to the new sketchbook page. I was really frustrated by this point in doing the studying, so it was a great time to just jump right into the sketchbook page. And I'll be honest, this was another one of those days where I just did not feel like doing my studies. Once I got those watercolor ones out of the way, I just decided to jump into doing the portrait, which, if you don't know, when I like to do these study sessions, I really like to do a portrait of the animal, try to capture the face as well as I can, and look for landmarks to help draw the face in the future. And it's something that I really enjoy doing. I think that it usually turns out pretty good, and it teaches me a lot about how the face is structured. So I jumped right into doing that. I had a lot of fun doing the portrait. It was definitely the part of the spread that I spent the most time on. And I think that it's probably about my second favorite on this spread. In case you're new, I have been doing studies of other animals. I did horses, I think, last week, and then before that I did some St. Bernard studies, and I, for some reason, kept trying to implement some of the things that I had learned into foxes, which didn't work very well. It helped in some aspects and was not helpful in other aspects, but foxes to me are really confusing because I feel like they're kind of a middle ground between like a small wolf and a house cat almost. Because when I did the portrait, I was really having a hard time not letting it look like a dog. And that tends to be a problem with most of the faces that I drew for the foxes, is that I feel like a lot of them look a little more dog-like. I was trying to really kind of push them to have more cat features towards the end because I feel like foxes have more of a cat style face, except for having like the longer muzzle part. But it was really frustrating because I was trying to compare them to dogs and cats, and it was just really difficult. Our second pen study honestly turned out pretty bad as well. It was one of the more dynamic poses. I try to do more dynamic poses, try to get the flow of the animal a bit. It's really hard, but I think it's really rewarding as well. My more dynamic poses, none of them really turned out very good, and they were each very frustrating to work on, but they also helped me immensely with understanding the anatomy. The more that I work on these studies, the more confident I feel about drawing animals, and I think especially since I've been focusing primarily on animals that walk on 4 legs, it has been really helpful because they're more similar than, say, learning a bird versus an animal on 4 legs. I was having a really hard time with this third one. I was having a hard time viewing the reference photo as well. I'm really struggling with using Pinterest for reference photos. I don't really know where I can get more. I don't know where else I can get a large variety of reference photos. I think I may try Google in the future, but I really have no idea what else I should do. So once I finished up this third study, I was pretty defeated. I was really frustrated with Pinterest. I was frustrated with the sketching. I was even frustrated with my pen because, like I mentioned before, I don't sketch with pen a lot. I've been trying to push myself to use it more, but I really have a hard time using it. I feel like it has added an extra challenge to the sketchbook spread. However, when we went into the 4th study, I was feeling much better. I started off this one different than the rest, I think. For the 2nd and the 3rd study, I plotted out like where the different major body parts were, like the head, the legs, the torso, and the pelvis, which are kind of like the basic building blocks to an animal. But with the 4th one, I did more construction than that. I focused on like kind of identifying the bones and muscles and where the ear should be placed, and trying to do kind of a more detailed sketch. Because the way that I normally sketch is I do like a very light, vague pass for my sketch, and then I just jump right into adding the details and finishing it up. But for number 4, I spent my time a little longer trying to plot things out super lightly and trying to make sure that I had every feature in the right place before I jumped into refining some of those details. And once I had finished up that 4th study, I had a lot more confidence. I was feeling much better about the entire thing. I think that that really saved the page. I still really loved the first study that I did, but the second and the third study were just so discouraging to work on. Most of this is my own fault because going into these study sessions, I think that I am very lazy. I tend to kind of want to rush through it and not spend my time on it too much. Mileage is also important because if you're sitting there and you're trying to make each study look perfect, then you're going to spend a lot of time just to be unhappy. But if you just speed through them and the ones that you sped through don't turn out as good, it doesn't feel as bad because you didn't invest as much time into them. Going into the fifth one, by this time I was fed up with Pinterest, so I screenshotted the remainder of the references I was going to use and just closed out Pinterest. This one was interesting to sketch. It was another jumping pose, a lot more dynamic and interesting. Both do and don't like the pose. I wish that the back legs were visible, but they weren't in the reference, so I just didn't bother with them. I try, when I do these study sessions, I try to make sure that the legs and paws are visible for the most part, trying to make sure that I'm taking every opportunity I can to learn the different parts of the animal. I find that that's just the best way to really learn. It was frustrating because I feel like the face turned out very dog-like, but for the rest of it, I was pretty happy with it, and I was really proud of how the front paws turned out. And then we have our sixth one. I was really tired of this sketchbook spread, tired of using my pen, so this one was pretty scribbled in, very rushed. I still kind of like it. I think it's a really good pose to draw. I sometimes forget how different muscles and bones connect within the animal, and sometimes when I'm drawing from my head, I kind of make up anatomy, so I definitely need to slow down and focus. And one of the main areas that I do this in is where the arms and legs connect to the body. All in all, I am pretty proud of the spread. I was looking at it and I felt like the space next to the portrait that I did in the beginning, there was just enough space for something to go there, and I just didn't want to go back on Pinterest, so I just kind of made up my own stuff and tried to use what I learned to draw foxes. The first one at the top, it needs a lot of work. I definitely should have drawn it bigger and focused on trying to make it accurate. But it looks weird. Don't really like it, but I'm just glad that I tried something else, to be honest. And then the second one, it was much easier. It was more of a static pose and really close to one that I'd already drawn, so it was fine. I like how that little one turned out, and overall I'm pretty happy with the spread. I was thinking about adding color or something, but I just decided to try again with watercolors, and this very last attempt turns out really good. I did the wet and wet method again, this time ensuring that I preserved the white of the page in the spots that I wanted it. I made sure to try to keep everything pretty saturated, try to keep it very bright and light. I think that I did a pretty good job. It definitely isn't perfect, but I think that it's definitely an improvement from the ones that I did before. I really like how I painted the fur. It doesn't feel like too much like it did with some of my other attempts, and I was really struggling with differentiating the parts of white fur, but I think adding in those touches of blue really helped this piece. I think the only thing that I would really change now is more details on the face and adding a shadow underneath our fox. I'm really happy with how all of this turned out. I always jump into these sketchbook sessions not feeling super hot about my art, and I always come out of them feeling really good because I learned something and I feel like I'm progressing my skills every day. I really appreciate you watching until the end. If you have any suggestions for animals that I should study in the future, I would love to hear them in the comments down below. I think that's all we have for today, so thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.